Thank you for your patience. Mr. Mayor, Council, Happy New Year. This project before you, as Mr. Mayor mentioned, this is a Monterey mixed-use project located on 8955 Monterey Road. This picture shows the project location. It's roughly on the north side of the town. To your left has Highway 101 right here, Monterey Road. Leavesley is this road down below, and Las Animas is up here. The project site is about 2 acres, right around here. The current zoning for the project site is R4, and R4 is also the zoning for the adjacent property to the north and also to the south. Current uses of the site including a church and also a granite supply business, and a preschool to the north, and a used car dealership to the south. Surrounding the neighborhood is existing residential properties to the north, to the west, and as well to the south. The proposed project will be a 5-story mixed-use development with 4 commercial units on the ground level, 4 stories of residential units, mainly 5-story facing Monterey, and gradually tapers down as it's being sensitively designed to be in the same height with the existing residential neighborhood. There will be a total of 78 residential units. Of the 78 units, 69 will be market rate and 9 will be affordable. And the 9 affordable units are required through the state density bonus provision. This is a proposed elevation. As I mentioned, this will be the Monterey frontage at 5-story tall and gradually tapering down to about 2-story. Note that there's no residential component on the ground level. What you're looking at right here are just garages and carports. This is the east elevation. Again, that will be the Monterey frontage elevation, 5-story talls, and there will be mature canopy trees placed in front of the frontage along Monterey. Residential amenities such as indoor gym, multi-purpose room, enclosed playground, on-site bike storage, and a rooftop terrace will be provided to the on-site residents. And a public amenity right here along Monterey Road will include a public plaza that's about approximately 50 feet wide public space with 3 large planters, a bus stop, and then also a water feature or chess table to engage and also activate the front Monterey Road so that we can encourage pedestrian and bike activity. This rendering is provided by the developer showing an illustration of the public plaza. Again, this will be on Monterey looking to the south. Monterey Road will be right here. Access road to the back of the property. This is the approximately 50 feet wide with 3 large planter area with seating facing the commercial retails and with the chess table or water feature fountain to really activate this space. And also there will be a new bus stop shelter that will be constructed as part of the project. Another view looking at the public plaza area, looking at the mature canopy trees to provide a sense of a human scale from the pedestrian to the 5-story building. On-site circulation, green arrow shows a commercial usage. So if someone was supposed to come use these commercial spaces down below, there will be a 2-way loop access to use the commercial parking spaces that are designated in blue to access the commercial area. Residential circulation are shown in red, which will be taken to the back of the property. Tandem parking is provided for each of the unit as well as guest parking. There will also be a pedestrian access connecting from Monterey Road straight down to a pedestrian single door access to Weaver Court. This will provide a safer route to school for kids that are residing on the project site and also encourage the pedestrian access to nearby trails. This is a 2-way loop access, therefore there will be no emergency vehicle access required through this access back here. Parking is shown in blue for commercial and also beige color for residential. parking calculation requires about 166 spaces altogether, and there will be 171, 5 exceeding the requirement provided for this project. This diagram shows the parking requirement through the density bonus provision that requires 1 space to be provided for 1 bedroom, 2 spaces provided for 2 and 3 bedroom, and 2.5 spaces provided for 4 plus bedrooms, in addition to 1 space provided for every 250 square feet of a retail space. Based on the project logistic, we're looking at 8 bedrooms in addition to 32 bedrooms, 32 2-bedroom and 37 3-bedroom and 1 4-bedroom. Altogether, we're looking at 166 spaces required, and there will be 171 spaces provided on site. And this parking arrangement and dimension and the requirement is listed in condition 59. In addition, staff has incorporated condition 63 to ensure that parking will not be an issue to the neighborhood, that there's adequate and there's not going to be any overflow parking, so that there will be a key fob provided to each of the residents to have access to the Weaver Court, and that there will be parking management plan reinforced by the on-site management.
Pamela, I just
Yes.
wanted a clarification. So for the actual residents, they only have, the grand total, 148 spaces, and the additional spaces are for those people who are going to the shops?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have an additional question to that. And help me understand, the Alexander Station project, if it's a 4-bedroom, you can have actually 2 per bedroom plus 1, so you're looking at 9 individuals, right? Per a 4-bedroom.
Based on the Alexander Station calculation, correct.
Now, help me understand where this falls in. If we have 78 units, 8 are 1-bedroom, 32 are 2 bedrooms, 37 are 3, and 1 is a 4-bedroom.
I'm glad you asked that question. If I may exit this presentation, I actually have a different presentation that I can show you.
I was just teeing it up for you.
Thank you. Let me. So this is the parking comparison between Alexander Station project and the Monterey project. Before I go into detail, they are the project parking requirement based on 2 complete different calculation. So the Monterey mixed-use project is based on the state density bonus provision in addition to the city retail parking commercial uses space. The Alexander Station is based on the city government code, and based on that, it's within our downtown specific plan. Therefore, what Councilmember Tovar was mentioning was something along this line. So the Alexander Station requirement was requiring 1 space for a unit that's less than 800 square feet, 1.5 for units that's greater than 800 square feet, in addition to 1 guest space for 6 units and above. So there's different calculation calculated for Alexander Station. As opposed to the Monterey mixed-use project, there's no allowance or calculation or consideration, if you will, for guest parking. It's
Right.
strictly for the residents that are on site.
No, and that's wonderful, but I'm just trying to visualize it here.
So if you were to allow me to go a little further, so if you were to take the Monterey mixed-use apartment parking requirement applied on Alexander Station, you'll be looking at about 530 spaces, as opposed to, I think what I wanted to say is 452. And vice versa, if we were using the Alexander Station parking requirement to calculate a Monterey project, then it would have been less. It would have been 150 for the Monterey project, where they are required to provide 166. So even though they are similar project, the calculation for parking is really comparing apples and oranges. So there's a slight discrepancy depending on where you are, what zoning you are, and what policy and what provision that parking is.
And again, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert, and math's not my forte. So, but my concern is, if we have 78 units, and depending on the size of the unit, you can have 2, 4, 6, 8 people living in a unit.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct. There's no restriction on how many people.
Right. That's the key word right there, no restriction. So if I'm in the 3-bedroom and I have 6 people, I can guarantee you we're going to have more than 1 or 2 cars.
That's correct.
Okay?
Yes.
So in here it states that there won't be a problem with overflow parking. I disagree with that.
I see.
And again, I know that that's going to translate, or that's going to move over onto Monterey Road.
There's no parking allowed on
Right.
Monterey Road.
Right, no, I know that, but the businesses in that area will be affected. So you understand what I'm saying is?
Yes.
I understand that, we're saying we have adequate parking spaces, but in reality, we don't.
Yes. And then if you can allow me to go back
No,
to my
please,
original
please.
presentation.
I
and
think
just-
we're working in tandem here.
I
so-
know, and you cue me right up to, oh, shoot. I think I am right here. Okay. I actually don't have this slide up, but in your staff report, condition 63 is added per the Planning Commission's direction to say that should on-site parking is found to be insufficient and causing any congestion problem to the existing neighborhood, then the architectural and site review permit may be subject to revocation or modification.
Right.
So that's an assurance to say, in the future, if there is indeed a parking problem, then the city has the discretion to bring the project back to either Planning Commission or Council's review and revoke their
And I guess
architecture.
I'll say this, it will be coming back. I'll tell you why. Because you look at the Alexander Station, a lot of people parking in that shopping center. It's going to happen here where they park in these surrounding businesses. So I just, again,
Right.
when you don't have a restriction on the number of individuals you can live in a unit, it's going to overflow.
Right, so the statement goes back to
I just
their
want to make sure we all know that that's going to happen.
point well taken.
Yeah.
And the reason why staff made the statement that it will not be any overflow based on the calculation requirements stipulated by the state.
Okay. Can I ask an additional question, not on parking, but maybe I'll hold off, it's regarding the school district?
You can ask that, it's not part of my presentation, but
Okay, so I see that the school district was, their feedback was received.
yes.
But it's important, because I think we brought this up a while back, that with any new projects, it's important for the residents, important for us, the message that whoever decides they want to purchase or, that they know that the school district is not going to supply busing for these kids.
Yes.
Okay, and given the location, I understand the safe routes, and I'm glad that the Bike and Pedestrian Commission got involved, but I just want to make sure that we get that out in the open and people know that the school district will not provide busing from there to Christopher Highway. Okay.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned it.
Pamela, I have one question before you go on. The overflow, being new, I'm a little confused about what I just heard. So clarify for me. You said that if they realized that there was going to be more cars than what the parking allowed, the project would return to the Planning Commission?
To either the Planning Commission or Council. The way that the condition is worded right now says that if there's found to be a problem, their architect permit could be revoked or modified.
Okay, but they wouldn't know if they had a parking problem until they built the building and rented out the apartments, because right now you could say, well, a 3-bedroom, 2 cars.
That is
And then all of a sudden, in reality, it's 6, so isn't that a little too late?
It can be, however, as I mentioned, the minimum requirement is satisfied.
Right.
And then, in fact, that they actually provide 5 extra spaces.
Right, okay.
So we could put in a extra condition to ensure that this will not happen. But we can't, staff is in a tough position to conclude that this will absolutely happen.
Because it's not built and they're not rented, so you don't know, so it's really a guessing game. And then once it's rented out, then what happens? I mean, what do we do?
Once it becomes a problem to the neighborhood, since there's no parking allowed on Monterey, the most impacted neighborhood would be the Weaver Court neighborhood. They can definitely contact the city, contact the department, and becomes a code enforcement issue.
Oh, wow. Okay, all right.
All right, so I want to follow up on both what both council members are talking about down here, because the condition says, sufficient on-site parking, blah, 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 it's insufficient, causing congestion. Then the arc and site review permit may be subject to revocation or modification. what I think Councilmember Marks is asking is, when this thing is fully built out, when tenants are there, and there's a parking problem there, what recourse does the city have?
The city's recourse will be revoking their Arkansas permit.
But what does that mean? It's a building, it's a project, it's there. What does revoking their permit mean?
Thank you that's a very good question. So, ultimately the management of the parking and the demand on site is up to the management company and the leasing office. And I think that's what the intent of that condition is. That was a concern that was raised at the Planning Commission meeting, so that's the reason why this condition was added. It really puts that onerous onto the on-site management company, so that they're aware of, that as they're leasing their units out. And I guess I would, at this point, when the applicant comes up, perhaps they can address it, because I think we're getting into the weeds a little bit at this point on that parking issue. And I do understand it's very important, but I do think it's important that the applicant chime in on how they are going to, address that, and that they recognize that, and I think that will probably answer some of your questions.
Okay.
So that, perhaps at least the rest of the presentation can continue. And I'm sure you're going to have other questions as well, but,
Well,
definitely keep
we
that in
certainly
mind.
will hear the rest of the presentation, but I do think that for us to be talking about the revocation or modification of an Arkansas permit seems to me like a little, it's a toothless tiger. And I would agree that once this thing is fully built out, and if there's a parking problem there, that if we were to call, if someone neighborhood was to contact the city, the first thing we would do is contact the management company and say, you guys are having a parking problem. It's impacting our surrounding neighbors. The council's getting calls, the mayor's getting calls. Come up with a parking plan, do something. But we're not going to go to this because
You wouldn't really be able to revoke it because, as you said, the building is already built. So
Yeah,
to
exactly.
revoke it would be tear down the building, which makes no sense. I agree.
okay. All right.
So just really quickly at a higher level on just the parking requirements, the code puts in parking requirements based on best estimate, best use, and those are the requirements. Not in every case will the parking be that number. In some cases, in some situations, there's far more parking spaces than is needed. In other situations, there is more parking demand than what is provided. So the general intent of having a parking requirement is that it averages out. However, in our zoning ordinance, it does say the intent of the parking is that all demand be provided on site.
On site,
So
right.
it's just a matter of trying to find that balance.
No,
for
we
each and
do,
every
we do
project.
have to try to find that balance because on the one hand, you don't want to overbuild parking where all you have is parking spaces. And conversely, that's not good for the housing market because now we have plenty of parking spaces but too few housing. So we're constantly struggling to find that balance. I get that. But that, again, the revocation or modification, I understand it. It's
And
just-
I just wanna
I
leave you
think
with
it's
that
really
thought.
important for the council to hear that
Okay.
as well, that we're not going to be able to do much with that. And in fact, we'll probably turn it over to the management company to really come up with a parking plan. Because my concern is there is parking allocated for the commercial sites, but I guarantee you, if there's more cars per unit, those units are going to be using those commercial parking spaces. So, okay, good enough. Let's continue on with the presentation, please.
Okay. As I mentioned, this project was brought to Planning Commission for their consideration October 4th. The commission unanimously voted to approve the project, and in fact, the several numbers from the public showed up in the Planning Commission hearing, and mostly were from existing church that will be relocated. And there was nobody who showed up in opposition of the proposed project at the Planning Commission meeting. In addition to approving the project, the commission also recommended to require pedestrian access as a condition of approval to Weaver Court. So that was added to after the Planning Commission hearing. On November 19th, the council had the item and opened a public testimony, and the council also had questions regarding the project affordability, whether or not there's Measure A funding provided to the project, if the proposed rooftop terrace will have imposed any privacy issue, and whether or not there's any employment center conflict, and what are the public amenities. So council decided that there was not enough time to fully evaluate the project. It was continued to today. In your staff report today, one of the questions answers the project affordability. This chart is also includes your staff report. At this point, the applicant, the developer has confirmed that their target rental rate is a $3.25 per square feet, and that would eventually range the target rate, the rental rate around $2,000 for a one bedroom to about $3,000 for a two bedroom unit, about close to $4,000 and close to $6,000 for a four bedroom. Compare that to the average Gilroy rent based on a website. We're looking at about slightly higher than the average rent. And also comparing that to the countywide, the maximum affordable unit can be charged. That is also higher than the affordable units. Be mindful that this is a market rate with the 15% affordable units built in through the density bonus. And the market rate of 69 units could be considered as a moderate income, which equates to 80 to 120% of the AMI average median income for our RENA allocation, where a housing element still requires and would like to see more numbers in that category. And in addition to council's concern, staff also proposed to add another condition, and the bold language says that any modification to the total number of affordable units provided on site is subject to city council's approval in the future, which means in the future, if somehow there's Measure A funding or state funding or Fed funding to convert this into a 100% affordable project, that modification will require council's further review. The next question has to do with privacy and how would that, how is the design satisfying the existing neighborhood. This is an aerial picture of the subject site. Red shows the boundary, existing boundary, which will be a 7-foot tall masonry sound wall built along the perimeter. The blue box shows the approximate location of the rooftop terrace. As I mentioned earlier, the 5-story elevation is mainly along Monterey frontage, with the building gradually tapers down. Right around this point, you're looking at about 3-story tall, which is slightly taller than existing 2-story single-family residence, but with ample buffer, which is about 30 feet on each side, mature trees, and also landscaping, there will not be a privacy issue imposed to the existing neighborhood. In addition, that I think when the other question was raised by about the employment center, staff verified with the General Plan 2040 effort that the employment center is much to the north and also to the east of Monterey Road. The last question that council had at the November meeting is, what is the amenity? Normally we see public arts, we see sculpture. In this case, the developer has came up with the public plaza, which is a little different. To demonstrate what that really looks like, they have actually prepared a movie. Whoops. Okay. Let me see. Okay. All right, I thought I could do it, but, oh, there we go. Is that it? Let me see. Let's see. There you go. My fingers crossed. It's a 30-second video. Hopefully that will play. Okay, maybe on a different date. I think it's too large for me to generate that. Well, then I lost my PowerPoint too. So Lastly, I'd like to point to council several corrections and clarification for the in the staff report. In the previous staff report that was prepared in November, there was an error or typo made reference to parking. There it should state that there should be no overflow parking, and the parking calculation is mistakenly stated. And secondly, there is a typo in reference to the sound wall where it reads, where it reads 7 inches as opposed to it should be a 7-foot sound wall masonry constructed surrounding the property boundary. And lastly, there's a comment letter provided by the Bike and Pedestrian Committee that was not part of the packet, which I think now is part of the packet. In conclusion, staff recommends the council to adopt the M&D with the mitigated monitoring report program, to approve the architectural and site review, to approve the zone change for a PUD development, and also to approve the density bonus allowance. I'll be more than happy to answer any question.
Thank you. Councilmember, councilmembers, please queue up. Councilmember Bracco.
What's the height of the building on the 5-story?
The tallest portion will be 58 facing Monterey and tapers down to 2-story about 34 feet.
And what's our limit?
I believe it's 70 feet.
I thought we had a restriction on not over 4 stories, because I remember it came up over Alexander Station that there was a deal made to go past that.
The Alexander Station is a different zoning district. So in the downtown, you cannot go over 4-story a certain height. This is in the R4 zone.
So you can do it and just not in the
I believe so.
downtown?
I'm double checking my staff report. I believe you can go up to 75 feet, 6 stories in R4 zone.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Blankley.
Pamela. Okay. The photo or the slide that you showed that 7-foot sound wall going all the way around except on Monterey. But there is an opening, is there not, at Weaver Court? Isn't there an access?
Yes, there will be a single door pedestrian access.
Okay, right. So for bikes and things like that can go through there. Okay. Hang on. I wanted to point out that I got to take I'm sure anybody could, but a tour of Alexander Station with Councilmember Tovar and Gabe Gonzalez right before Christmas, and it's wonderful to have it's wonderful to have housing like that be able to be provided. Whether or not there are negative impacts to the community is entirely dependent on management, and because we have standards that we have to follow for the developer to put it in, and so far, as far as parking goes, and I, for one, was very concerned about parking at Alexander Station, and I still am, but so far, because I know the property owners of that shopping center that's next door, so far, there's not a parking that's going on over in the shopping center that's bothering them. Now, hopefully that isn't going to be in the future.
It's not built out, though.
I know, it's not built out, but people are moving in, and so far, that's not an issue. Whether or not it becomes an issue, among many other things, parking just being one of them, is dependent on management. We can't, we have to hope that the management does what they need to do, like any management of any apartment building, has to make sure that their residents are following the rules and not expanding out. So I'm happy to see that this project has, because it has different, excuse me, criteria or ordinances that you have to look at, that the parking ends up being more per unit than is at Alexander Station, because that one is probably the bare minimum what we should have, even though I know we're trying to encourage people to get out of their cars. I get that, but still it's a hard thing to do, and we don't want one good thing to then be a bad thing for somebody else. I think that's all I'm going to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Tucker.
Yes, so when you couldn't play the video, you didn't answer the question about the amenities. So what was the amenity?
It's the public plaza. So the public plaza is the public amenity so that the public can enjoy.
But isn't that part of the commercial portion of the building?
No, it's not. The commercial building will benefit greatly from the public plaza. So the public amenity to have the public plaza is to have the extra wide space. So they will have a 50-foot wide public plaza area that will have the big planters and the seating arrangement, and also with a bus shelter and bike storage all built in to activate the space in front of the commercial space.
So it'll have benches as well?
That's correct.
Okay. And my other question is, I didn't read all the conditions, sorry, but did you put a condition in there about, since you have a 7-foot masonry wall, you're going to deal with graffiti requirements and what have you for the on-site manager to take care of that in the future?
I do not, but I will include that as part of the condition.
Okay.
Councilmember Laurel Munoz.
Thank you. And that last comment actually sparked a new thought in me that I hadn't thought of before. With regard to the sound wall, Councilmember Tucker brings up a very good point about those oftentimes being a kind of a target for graffiti artists. When we look at that, when the applicant considers that, I'd like them to consider what's been done on portions of Santa Teresa where you have, the landscaping and overgrowth on there. So one, it looks better, but two, it also reduces the potential for graffiti on that. So I would very much ask them to consider that. But anyway, I did have two other questions. The first was around the water feature. You had mentioned a water feature, and I just want to be 100% clear, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I don't want to assume anything. When we're talking about a water feature, we're talking about something that's decorative only. It's not
That's
an
correct.
interactive kind of thing you'd find at Gilroy Gardens, right?
No.
Okay.
So water feature in my mind is a flowing water fountain or something that has water involved. Yeah,
Okay. I just didn't.
it doesn't have water spitting from it.
Exactly. There we go. I didn't, I thought images of kids running through the water or
Unless
whatnot.
the developer has something extra, they're shaking
Okay,
their head.
just wanted to clarify that. My second question was around the business units there. Can you bring up the slide that includes the square footage?
For parking?
For the business units themselves.
So
I thought I saw square footage around business space.
So the total square footage for the 4 units together is roughly less than 5,000 square feet, 4,400.
Okay, so it's 3,400?
44.
4,400. And when we talk about that size, sometimes it's hard to visualize what that actually means. On one hand, it sounds like a lot. On the other hand, it's maybe not so much. What kind of businesses could utilize that type of space?
So right now, it's a collective about 4,400 square feet. It could be one large tenant with 3 smaller unit tenants or 4 equally divided tenants. I think the way we envision is a grocery market kind of a thing, pizzeria, eatery, or small offices, something that could either be large or also small. The parking calculation is based on retail, selling goods, eatery, restaurant, and also grocery store. So that's kind of how staff and developer envision the spaces to be utilized.
Okay, I think it's also helpful for us just to visualize that it could be something like a small market or a small with professional services.
Professional services, in addition to a pizzeria or taqueria, that type of thing.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tovar.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, great job presentation. I appreciate it. I appreciate you answering the questions as well. Going back to my concern and maybe, again, the condition I want to make sure we're as transparent as possible because, again, without transportation, you're looking at the schools in that area. The closest one is Antonio Del Bono. Okay.
That's true.
But now you're looking at South Valley and Christopher High School, which are pretty far away.
I agree.
So there's not going to be public or busing from the school district. So we need to make sure that people know that ahead of time. In addition to that, I'm looking at when this feedback was given back in August. A while back ago, we had a joint meeting with the school district, and they shared with us, unless something changes, but they shared with us that more than likely there's going to be a school that closes. Okay.
Okay.
So is it one of the schools that's listed here? I don't know. But I think it's important for us to know that as well, because if, let's just say, again, I don't know anything, but I'm just saying if it's Antonio Del Bono, now you're looking at 3 schools that these children are going to have to somehow get to, and it's not going to be the school district transporting them over. So I want to make sure we're transparent with the public
Yeah.
if and when this project sort of is,
During the project review, my conversation with GUSD is that they're actually very excited about the project, anticipating children to be enrolled in these schools that are declining on
Right.
their enrollment to help to rebuild the school. So they're really excited to see, especially with 2 or 3, 4 bedrooms, and then there will be children enrolling in the local schools.
No, and thinking like Councilmember Blankley mentioned earlier when we visited Alexander, one of the things that really caught my attention was the bike lockers that were there. And I think this one here is saying there's going to be 80 bike.
There's going to be 80 permanent bike lockers for the residents and also bike racks for
Right.
the
No, and I think that's
commercial
wonderful, and I'm hoping that they will take advantage of those. But again, we have to set it up to where they're going to use, if it's safe bike routes, whatever it may be, that has to be part of it. So
I agree.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Councilmember Bracco, before we start, City Administrator Gonzalez has a quick comment.
Sorry, Mayor and Council. Just with regards to the school district, we have a good working relationship with them. That I think what we'll do is we'll pass along the comments by council so that they take lead in the initiative to work with the developer to address these concerns in particular. We, the city, don't really have a lot of say on what the district does or doesn't do, but we'll definitely make sure that that's a concern. And maybe the developer's obviously hearing that, he can follow up with the school district as well to make sure that those are adequately addressed.
Councilmember Bracco?
You stated, I believe earlier, that there will not be any public art there.
There will not be any public art.
How is this plaza a benefit to the community?
The way staff envisioned it, the public plaza will invite the public, also residents in nearby neighborhood to enjoy the space and also to patronize the commercial spaces. So by walking, by biking, and also activating the space, the seating arrangement, the planters could become a public space, and that could be a public benefit to the community.
Okay. Council, on other projects on Monterey, we've required public art just because it looks good on Monterey Street, and I think we should on this too. This plaza is not that.
Pamela, do you have an image of the public plaza that you could put up? And so now we're looking down Monterey there.
We're looking
correct?
down on Monterey from the north to the south. There is another view.
And that bus overhang, that bus stop, that is not,
That's right around here. That's
yeah,
for,
but
yes.
is that, are you counting that as,
No, the bus shelter is not part of the public use. It's just a requirement that can be incorporated as part of the public plaza.
okay, but that bus stop, that bus shelter would be there whether or not that plaza was there?
I think the bus stop has to be there, whether or not the shelter has to be there, that's a different story.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, all right.
Where are the tables? I thought there were supposed to be tables. and
They're gonna
chessing.
be right in the middle, right here. When we were last talking about it, it wasn't finalized.
Jan, hang on.
So I think when, a month ago when we're brainstorming the idea, the way I envision is right in the middle, either a chess table where you can play chess or a water feature where you can enjoy the soothing sound, water sound in the background. But all of these will have seating benches facing the commercial stores. So they could function as a table or just a seating arrangement.
Okay. Councilmember Bracco, anything else? Councilmember Marks.
Well, maybe this is a protocol question. Will the architect be able to come up and talk to us? And then that's when I have my question.
Good enough.
Okay.
Anything else from the council? You know what? I do have a couple of quick questions for staff. Let me scroll back to it. With regards to the conditions of approval, we have one of the conditions, I thought I highlighted it here. With regards to condition number 70, residents and guests should not use Weaver Court for additional parking. Is there, how do we enforce that?
We can enforce that through a parking management plan that's enforced by the on-site management company.
Okay, so that they would then hold their residents accountable
That's
and
correct.
say, we're getting complaints, you're parking here.
Right.
We know your license plate number or something like that.
Right. The proposed arrangement right now says that each resident will have a key fob to the pedestrian access, and the key fob cannot be replicated so that everybody in the household gets a copy of the fee fob, and therefore you have free access. And then there will be educational flyer and also restriction placed on the lease agreement, and also basically just constant enforcing that this is not to be abused. But that will be a burden placed on the on-site management company.
Okay, that they would then hold their tenants responsible for.
That's correct.
Okay. I just don't want to be receiving complaints from Weaver Court residents. And then with regards to, and I can't find the number, it has to do with the construction hours. Those seem pretty standard. Oh, here we go. Item number 24, limit construction activity to weekdays between 7 and 7. One of the complaints, and I think council's going to continue to hear this complaint, at least I get it now, is construction crews showing up at 6 o'clock, and they start blaring music, start turning on equipment, start doing all this stuff so that they could get to work and start at 7, right? Yeah. And so, I'm getting calls saying, hey, you know what? They're not supposed to be starting before 9 a.m. on a Saturday, and I'm trying to sleep in, and I've got people showing up at 7:30, generators getting turned on. So again, how can we enforce that?
I think the city noise ordinance restrict from 7 to 7. Again, this will be a education to the developer and also the contractors to make sure that they play the good neighbor policy to not interrupt the neighbors' sleeping hours during the weekends and not get ready by 6 o'clock so that they can start working by 7.
Also, we've been receiving a lot of those complaints through code enforcement, and our building official at the end of the year has gone through to all the construction sites to make sure that every construction site has their hours posted for the public to see as well as their employees, and also helps to have that on site so that when our code enforcement officers do have to go out there sometimes still, then they can at least have that to point to in addition to what the municipal code says.
Great.
So we're working citywide on that issue. Perfect.
I think it's important for the general contractor to really hold those subs accountable and let them know, hey, you're hired for the job, but these are the hours, and don't show up early and
We're
fire up
also making sure
generators.
we're emphasizing those requirements and conditions and expectations in pre-construction meetings before they are, starting their construction work too.
Great, thank you. And then we already talked about 57, we talked about 63. We're good, okay. All right, let's go ahead and start out with Councilmember Bracco. Any ex parte communication on this item? Councilmember Tucker.
Yes, I did speak with the applicant's representation.
Yeah, who was that?
You need me to say exactly who it was?
Well, just the
Perry Woodward. The applicant's representation was someone named Perry Woodward.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Blankley.
Same as what Kat Tucker just said.
Councilmember Marks.
No.
Councilmember Tovar.
No.
Councilmember Peter Leroy Munoz.
I met with the applicants as well as spoke on the phone with Mr. Woodward.
Okay, I have had no communication. Next item is we're going to open up the public hearing. Shauna, do you have any cards?
I do. Do you want to hear from the applicant first?
Yes, I'm sorry, come on up. I thought you were going to call him up first. I thought he had turned in a card. No? Okay.
Members of the council, I hope to allay some of the concerns and fears that were expressed. And I want to say that you should commend your staff. I was part of the effort to develop a parking management plan for Alexander Station. And I have to say that your staff was extremely rigorous in crafting and enforcing. There were so many iterations I can't begin to tell you, but they were really very diligent in making sure the lease had provisions, there were penalties, that the cars had to have stickers. We've crafted this in a way so that nobody would use Weaver Court. They would be prohibited from parking on Monterey Road. And it's a market rate project, so there's a lot of incentive to make it, upscale and nice. I don't think the problem will be quite what Councilmember Tover is concerned about with the kind of lease restrictions and parking management plan that'll be in place. As far as the plaza go, I feel that Pam didn't quite communicate all the features that were intended there. So Commissioner Bracco, in addition to a generous plaza, we've got 2 chess table benches that are public features in the plaza, and that each end of the plaza has an artistic stainless steel sculptural bike rack that in itself is like a work of art. So I think the design of the plaza with the planters, the chess tables, the tile work on the facade of the building along the plaza, and those decorative bicycle racks, we've made a significant contribution to the aesthetics and the art of the plaza. So that I wanted you to understand that. The other important thing that I thought would be good to communicate is that in fact, that roof terrace is quite set back. It's a lot more than 30 foot. It's actually 45 feet from the property lines, and it's significantly buffered. We took great care explaining that to the Planning Commission, and we've really worked hard to articulate the mass of the building so it is sensitive and break it up so it has architectural interest. And we hope it be a real contribution to the fabric and the quality of life in Gilroy. So any other questions, I'm happy to indulge the council.
No. Did you, Jan, I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you want to say regarding the project itself?
Just that I think it's, we work with the community, the neighbors, and we got a lot of positive feedback. The need for housing, working with staff on long-range planning, general plan principles, enhancing the downtown core along Monterey, providing that kind of pedestrian. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission, that was 2.5 years ago when we were before them. And they were very complimentary and excited about it. And of course, they approved the project. But projects take a lot of effort, a lot of crafting. And all I want the council to know is we work really hard and sincerely to kind of give the community a really good project. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Don't walk away. Don't walk away.
So, Councilmember Marks, did you have a question?
Yes, well, it's a question, it's not really a question, it's a comment. When I know you have all these really nice amenities, and the shrubbery, the design looked very nice. However, when I looked at the whole blueprint, as soon as I opened it up, I thought of Alexander Station. And while I was campaigning, I have heard so many negatives about what that building looked like. And my platform talked about how every project that was going to be built in Gilroy was going to be aesthetically pleasing, because that building's not coming down in 5 years. It's going to be here for a long time. And when I drive past it, I want to be proud and say that building looks really great. Because developers need to know, they need to be proud that they're being allowed to build in Gilroy. And the reflection of that building says what we stand for. So to get my support, how hard is it going to be for you to tweak the front of that building? Because the builders of Alexander Station also built the apartments that are down a little ways from you. And they look good. It doesn't look like Alexander Station. They've got little pillars, they have just little ornaments. How hard would that be to make this a more pleasing project for the city?
So my answer to that is that if the architecture of this building is substantially different, while they're both contemporary buildings, if you notice the Monterey Road facade of this building, there's a lot more diversity of form and material. This is not an affordable housing project. Alexander Station was an affordable project, and it's easy to play the violin here, but there's tremendous challenges to make affordable housing work, even with tax credits and subsidies, and the pressure on the developer to cut costs and simplify things and eliminate costs is a lot greater than it is here. And I hope that you're able to see, if a side-by-side comparison, how much just putting the materials and color changes aside, just the diversity of volume and play and the richness of columns, canopies, different balcony materials is much more significant than what you've got on
See, from the
Alexander
roadway,
Station.
we don't see, the different quality of materials. We see the whole thing as a whole. And I see balconies, and I see flat walls and a flat top, and it reminds me of the other project. And I just don't want to see that developers get into a habit in Gilroy of building this cookie cutter building. I don't care what materials you put in it. I want to see different designs, and the public wants to see different designs. We want it to be aesthetically pleasing. So once again, I'm going to ask you, how hard would it be to add a little bit more curvature, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, so it just doesn't look like a project that's been thrown together?
Well,
And that might be a little harsh, and I probably don't mean it as harsh as it sounded.
Yeah, I would retreat to the unanimous Planning Commission approval. They're very aesthetic-minded. They applauded the design. While it's not a Tudor-style pitched roof type of architecture with shingles and that kind of thing, this is, in most people's view, a rather aesthetically pleasing project. I think with the landscape screening, the tile work, it's not Alexander Station. In a very simple way, the overall mass of the project steps down and has much more variety, and that was described by your own staff member, how this thing steps down dramatically. You don't have that in Alexander Station. So right there and then, just on a very simplistic massing, it's very different. So that should go a long way towards satisfying that kind of concern.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tovar, please.
Thank you, Mayor. That's what I get for letting Councilmember Marks go first, because of many of the comments that she mentioned. So, and again, I understand Alexander Station is completely different from this one here, but I go down Alexander Station there every day, and when Councilmember Blankley and I went to visit, I mean, they have some really nice things that they have to offer, but the piece that really just I can't get over is sort of the balcony walls that are all just cement, and it's, to me, I wasn't on here when that was voted for. Just something to me, I think in overdue time, it's not going to look good. But I think I have some of the same concerns about, let's make sure that this project looks really good, given where it's going to be located. I think we have an opportunity here to show the city that we can build nice apartments or condos or whatever it may be. So I ask that you please take those comments into consideration when you're really working through this. The other piece, and I didn't read on here, maybe you can help me out, is I know there'll be a management group on site, correct?
Correct.
But in regards to additional security, security systems, cameras, I mean, what is that going to look like?
Well, that's pretty standard
Right.
these days in multifamily housing. Lobby spaces, have security cameras, security fobs for residents to enter, call systems for visitors to call in and get in so that nobody can just wander through the building.
Right.
There are several on-grade amenities in this project near the playground, the gym, a little social room, bike lockers. All of that will have to have security control fobs for access, and residents will be the ones that have those.
And you just said something that I was kind of hoping and not hoping to hear. I mean, one of the things that the other, again, I don't mean to compare again, but it's what I have visually right here. Some of the little conference rooms, social rooms that they have at the Alexander Station where residents are able to go in and out, there's no security cameras installed inside those those rooms. And I worry about if we have children in there without any security system, we don't know what their safety, we don't know if they're safe or not. Do you follow what I'm saying here? I'm just trying to make sure that we make it as safe as
I think in the public spaces, it's, a standard to have good security. And if the council feels much more comfortable saying, hey, let's condition and make sure that in the public spaces, you have security cameras.
Well, no, I mean, that should be a given because,
Yeah,
again,
I agree.
I worry about the safety of our children out there, so.
Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Blankley.
Hi. It's funny how so much is subjective when it comes to how things look, I mean, it's pretty hard to get into everybody's head and know. I don't see any I do not see similar. This building does not make me think of Alexander Station at all, yet to someone else it might. I've looked at the plans, all the drawings that were there, and to me one does not remind me of the other at all. To me, this is more modern, industrial looking style, and whatever you want to call it, it's got to attract market rate rents that are pretty dang high. So it's got to appeal to a lot of people, or you're going to flop on this, right? So even if it doesn't appeal to certain members up here or people who've lived in Gilroy for a long time or whatever it is, there's a lot of younger generation coming out that is looking for something a lot more modern looking. And the glass balconies I know are very appealing to a lot. So that is not my world. That's not what I work in, but I trust that you're appealing to a market that's going to pay these rents. Right. And so it needs to look a certain way.
And
absolutely. The amenities, absolutely aesthetically pleasing to the people who are going to live there, too. What else did I want to say? That's all I can think right now. Sorry, I had something else.
On those railings, I'm happy, Councilmember Tovar, is that we don't have those cement railings.
Yeah, because that was something we were commenting when we were there. We were told when we were touring Alexander Station that the reason so many of the balconies looked different was they were trying to break it up, but they are all pretty solid looking, and the see-through is very nice. Also, the color. I mean, again, it's preferences. I don't care for the color of Alexander Station at all, but that's my preference. Anyway, I do not see this does not remind me of that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear. I'm not comparing you to them. It's just sort of what I've seen from them. And I actually appreciate the work and effort and design that you're putting into this. And I think my comment's very similar to, my colleague here is just making sure that, we have a product that's beautiful for the city. And I think what you're saying and what you're showing us is what you're producing. And I commend you on that. Just for me, I just want to make sure that we don't cut corners and that we try to make it as safe as possible. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I could assure you that my role as an architect, if it wasn't for delivering something of quality and design and aesthetics, it's not worth it. So, I mean, I'm really on board with the council, and that's my passion, is to do a quality project for the city.
Okay. Jan, any final thoughts?
Unless you have any questions.
Nope. I want to get on to other speakers.
Okay.
So, okay, good enough. Jan, thank you so much.
We have Bill O'Connor, followed by Ron Kirkish.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm not going to speak for or against this proposal. I'm reacting more to the discussion that I've heard up here, particularly actually discussion about the parking. I don't know what they're meeting the requirements, so that makes perfect sense, and that they shouldn't be penalized for that. But what I don't know is what's the right number. My wife and I were married, and when we first started, we lived in a one-bedroom apartment. We had 2 cars. We've lived in Gilroy for 34 years now. We have a 3-bedroom house. We got 2 cars. Never had any more than that. So I don't know what the ratio is, but it seems to me somebody could go out and find out for a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, what is the average number of cars that are in that kind of a facility, so that when you come here and say you're going to have too many cars, that you can look at some evidence that this is the right way to calculate this. I mean, I don't know whether it's the right number, but why are we having this discussion on pure opinion as opposed to what the data shows? Thank you.
Ron Kirkish, followed by Terry Graham.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mr. Bracco brought up, how do we link this to the city? How do we make it intrinsically keen to the city? And several months ago, when Pamela was kind enough to go through the site with me at Prince, it really did stick out, the plaza. And I've done some thinking on that. That is really, it's different than we have anywhere else in town that I believe. It's different, and it's different in a good way. I'm not necessarily going to buy what is on the picture right now, but it reminds me, when I saw it, I thought, we can give that really a classy name. Something like, I'm not saying call it the Champs-Élysées, but, give it maybe a name like a Plaza of Champions. Something that would give it something unique and nice. And then maybe attractive. Maybe if we have a nice pizzeria there or something like that, that would draw maybe kids from the high schools. And if the high school has a nice year and has won a championship, they can put a little plaque on that Plaza de Champions, something like that. That's kind of how I envision the plaza. And I'll tell you, that is one thing when Pamela took me through it that really intrigued me. It stood out, so thank you.
Terry Graham.
Hello. I just need to address the issue of the color on the Alexander
Ma'am, appreciate you being here. We'd appreciate it more if you could speak into the microphone.
Sorry about that. I'm real nervous. So I do live off of 10th Street, so I see Alexander Station. I've gotten used to it. I'm not bothered by the colors, but as I'm looking at the balconies there, one thing I noticed pulling out of the commercial sites over there were the balcony coverings, and I do like the differences. There's openness, there's some artwork, grill work, but what I noticed were all the mops and the dead plants sitting on the balconies. And it took away from anything pleasing. And it sounds nitpicky, but if that's going to be on Monterey Road and we're attracting the kind of rents or the rents, I don't think we want to, that's going to be a pleasurable thing to see as we're driving up and down. So that's just my little quirky, noticeable piece about this. I don't know that I'm listening to the discussion on the architecture, and I think you made a good point, Ms. Blankley, about it's an age difference type of thing. So we know that we have the housing, and it's been really enlightening for me to listen to the counties getting into Gilroy's open land access. So we can't stop the flood, but we can put up a few barriers, and that's what I'm hearing now, and I'm liking the discourse that's coming about, and I still don't know what I agree on and what I don't agree on. So you guys have a huge task in front of you, but I appreciate the questions and the time that you're putting into this project. So thank you on especially the balconies. I don't know about glass.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Yeah. I don't know what I agree on or don't agree on yet either, so. Okay, yes.
Yeah, just a comment on the balconies because, again, Councilmember Tovar and I, when we were touring, I think you asked that very question, laundry hanging over, I mean, just anything that is unsightly. And again, it's a property management thing. It's like any apartment building. It's in their rules. They're not supposed to do it. There's not supposed to be where they put their bike, where they put even a barbecue. They're not supposed to put those things out there. At Alexander Station is a little more shaded. Here it's going to be completely visible. So they're not supposed to store boxes out there, put their empty suitcases out there. I mean, none of that stuff is supposed to be there. So again, it comes down to enforcement. That's what I was saying about a lot of things. And, I would hope that if I'm a tenant there paying that kind of rent, that my property management is enforcing, what I have to see when I come home every day. So yeah, good point. We know.
Yeah, we asked that question over and over.
Councilmember Leroy Munoz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to
Just a moment, hang on, Councilmember. Do we have any other speaker cards? Okay, so Councilmember, just a moment. Let me go ahead and close the public hearing, and please go ahead.
Yeah. If I could just ask Pamela to come back up for a second. Bill raised a very good question as to making sure that with regard to parking, we're talking about, we're talking about a methodical way of determining or trying to predict what the parking is. And parking needs at one type of apartment are going to be different maybe from another type of apartment, whether it's, a retirement apartment versus an apartment like this. Mm-hmm. Based on the numbers you have here, what was the thinking for how you got to the numbers that were needed for parking here?
I'm glad you asked the question. So those are estimate for what type of project, what they are, where they're located in proximity to other uses. So based on this project, it was, so parking requirement was calculated based on the state density bonus provision. So because the developer has included the state density provision, the state has a specific parking, quote unquote, some flexibility in providing less parking than the normal would to incentivize a project of this sort. So the state has very specific guideline in terms of how many parking spaces for how many number of bedroom, and then specifically there's no allowance for guest parking. So I think as I earlier pointed out, the state requires 1 parking spaces for 1 bedroom unit, 2 spaces for 2 and 3 bedroom units, and 2.5 spaces for 4+ bedroom units. So comparing that to Alexander Station, the city code, because that's in a downtown area, and the city code does take into consideration of guest parking, the city code actually requires, on top of the normal parking for the units, additional units allocated for guest parking, and that's not part of that parking here.
Okay, so those additional parking units are not presented?
Right, they're two different calculations, 2 different formulas.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So Pamela, the parking requirement is less restrictive because of the state density bonus.
I wouldn't say they're less restrictive, they're different. They're different in...
They're different than what if this project had no density bonus, we would have a higher parking standard. I'm asking, I don't know if that's correct.
I don't know that either. I think I will have to fall back to my zoning code to do another calculation and do the comparison. The reason I said they're different comparing to Alexander Station is that the Alexander Station...
I hear what you're saying, and there's a lot of discussion regarding Alexander.
Right.
But as you pointed out,
it's a different formula.
It's a different formula. It's a different project in a different zone.
Right.
A lot of differences, and I do think it is an apples and oranges comparison. I don't want to drag down the applicant with a project that was, very controversial in the community.
Right.
And stuff. So, I want this project to rise or fall on its own merits.
Right. In addition to number of parkings, because this is a density bonus project, the applicant is allowed to ask for 1 concession. We have to keep in mind the tandem parking is the tandem parking is allowed as part of the density bonus. On top of that, the developer is proposing to do compact spaces, and that's the 1 concession that they're asking on top of the tandem parking and also the different parking formula, if you will, for this project. So it'll be difficult to say if there's no density bonus request within what is the total parking count.
Right. Okay. All right, good enough. Councilmember Romanos?
Just one other quick follow-up, maybe to finish this off. Pamela, is it your professional opinion that this number of spaces is sufficient to meet the residential and commercial parking needs?
Based on the policy, is satisfy the requirement. It meets the minimum requirement.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Bracco.
I have a question for the applicant.
Jan, can you come on up, please?
Would you be okay if we required a piece of public art, say, not to exceed $10,000?
I'm getting the affirmative from the applicant.
Okay.
Client.
Huh? Okay, thank you. So,
Just make sure it's a local artist.
Mr. Mayor, with that, I'd be willing to make a motion, but my thing's not letting me.
Hang on a second, because we got a couple of things.
Sorry.
So, Pamela, can I ask you to come back up? We heard council members talk about a few different things. One is the wall itself, the sound wall. I think you answered this. I just want to make sure. Is there any kind of anti-graffiti, coating, paint, anything like that going on that sound wall?
Currently, no, but we'll include that as part of the
Can
new
you
condition.
can we make that one of the conditions then?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think it was Councilmember Rocco or Tucker mentioned landscaping along the, or was it down here? Councilmember Lowerman, let's give credit where credit is due. Councilmember Leroy-Munoz had asked about landscaping along the sound wall as well, because it does help, one, break up the sound wall. I'm not a big fan of sound walls. That's why we're trying to actually limit them along Santa Teresa. But to the extent possible, landscaping that area with whatever, brush or trees or
Just
whatever.
to clarify, we're looking on the project site landscaping, right? Because this is going to be a shared sound wall fences with the neighboring property as well. So landscaping, perimeter landscaping is already included as part of the condition.
That's what I'm trying to understand. So the landscaping, though, on the condition, and maybe you could highlight the condition for me. What condition are you referring to?
If you refer to condition number 46, it reads, prior to issuance of a building permit, the landscape plan should include a minimum of 3-foot landscaping strip around the perimeter of subject property. Right now, it reads a 5-foot sound wall, but that'll be stricken out to read a 7-foot sound wall along the property line for outside. So right now, the condition already includes a 3-foot landscaping strip along the perimeter property lines.
Okay, so I would turn then to Councilmember Leroy-Munoz. Does this condition 46 satisfy your concerns?
It would, yes.
Okay. All right, and then it wasn't just Councilmember Tovar and Councilmember Blankley who toured Alexander Station. I also had taken a tour there, and they do have very strict requirements when it comes to the balcony. I'm wondering, though, is that something we could make as a condition, or do we simply just say, it's up to the developer, the management company to enforce that?
Looking back to elevation, I do see that the entire front elevation has many glass balconies. I think with the agreement from the developer, we can certainly turn that into a condition to say that the on-site management company will monitor or enforce the cleanliness or the appearance of the balcony.
Right, okay. And I do
facing
think
Monterey
that, I think there's a willingness from the council to make sure, Councilmember Romanos.
No, I'm in agreement with where you're going. I might also suggest maybe frosted glass as an exception. That just removes the work on the part of having to manage that.
Well, I do think that the frosted glass certainly helps, but stepping back from the frosted glass for a moment, I think we're concerned about, suddenly a bunch of clothes or towels or the mops hanging over the edge and, things like that.
Right.
If we're going to have a multifamily project, we, especially at market rate, we want to have a nice, nice appearance.
We can certainly include condition of such to be, and to include language as part of the lease agreement so that the on-site management company can enforce.
Perfect. Okay, and with the willingness of the council, okay with that? Okay. And then we heard Councilmember Bracco talk about a condition to, I don't know how to word this, but like a $10,000 donation to, not to exceed $10,000 for a public art project there in the front area.
Future to be gone through with the Public Art Committee.
To go through the Public Art Committee. Okay, but so does that, maybe it's a question for Gabe, is this Public Art Committee for the front of their project or for anywhere in Gilroy?
It usually does go through them for any art project. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm trying to understand, would this future project go in front of the plaza?
Yeah.
Or just, okay, all right, but approved by the Public Art Committee, got it. Okay?
Can I ask for clarification in terms of timing? Right now, we're asking prior to occupancy that the public plaza is fully constructed. Would that be the same for the public art?
Yeah, when it's done, yeah.
Okay, in addition to what has been presented?
Yes.
Okay, noted.
Okay. And then, Council, we also heard from Councilmember Marks, who was concerned about the overall, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the overall facade of the project, and suggesting that perhaps, because this is an Arc and Site approval, so the council has some discretionary review, to potentially just send it back and ask them to perhaps come back with either an improved design or to kind of show us a little bit better what it is that they're proposing. Is there any willingness from the council?
So, may I speak?
Yes.
I agree with Councilmember Blankley in that I think it's kind of like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, I don't know that it's really required to go back and tweak it. But if you're going to go modern, this is modern, right? So if you're going to go in a different direction, then you add awnings or cute little things around the windows. So I don't want to be in such a way that we're upsetting the modern, architect of the building. So I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to say to that, to your request. I would say that.
Okay. If there's no.
If I may,
yes.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're both saying. Is I think you've heard what we would like, and I think taking that information, and when the design, I think taking all that in consideration, and I'm good with that. Okay. That's just me. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Marks, I hope I captured your intention. Okay. I think that was it from the council. Anything else? Did I miss anything? All right. Okay, so.
I think I heard Councilmember Tovar mention cameras on the plaza.
Oh, I thought that was answered, though.
Yes, no,
But
I mean, it's my understanding that there will be
part of
cameras,
existing-
especially in those rooms that, yeah. Yes, thank
Okay.
you, thank you.
Councilmember Tovar, you cool then? Okay. All right, council, we have looks like we have a motion by Councilmember Tovar, seconded by Councilmember Tucker. I'm assuming to adopt the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Monterey Mixed-Use Development Project based on findings required by CEQA and by CEQA. So let's take care of that one first. Please vote. And that passes on a 7-0 vote. Next item, or next motion, is to read the ordinance by title only and waive further reading. We have a motion by Councilmember Tovar, seconded by Councilmember Bracco. Please vote, Shauna. And that passes unanimously. Shauna, please read the ordinance title.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Gilroy approving zone change Z-1703, a planned unit development for the 78-unit mixed-use Monterey apartment development filed by Jan Hochhauser.
Thank you. We have a motion to introduce an ordinance, City Council of the City of Gilroy, approving zone change Z-1703, a planned unit development for the 78 mixed-use Monterey apartment development. Can I get a motion, please? We have a motion by Councilmember Tovar, seconded by Councilmember Bracco. Please vote.
This is a roll call vote.
Excuse me, roll call vote.
Marie Blankley.
Yes.
Dion Bracco.
Yes.
Peter LaRomagnos.
Yes.
Carol Marks. Fred Tovar.
Yes.
Kat Tucker.
Yes.
Roland Velasco.
Yes. That passes unanimously. Next item is also a roll call vote. This is a motion, I need a motion, colleagues, to adopt a resolution, City Council, City of Gilroy, approving the architectural and site application AS 16-19, planned unit development, arc and site review for the construction of 78 mixed-unit Monterey apartment development. We have a motion by Councilmember Bracco, seconded by Councilmember Blankley. Please vote, and roll call.
This is Resolution 2019-01. Marie Blankley.
Yes.
Dion Bracco.
Yes.
Peter LaRomagnos.
Yes.
Carol Marks.
Yes.
Fred Tovar.
Yes.
Kat Tucker.
Yes.
Roland Velasco.
Yes. All right. That passes unanimously. Congratulations. Okay. Next item up is unfinished business. Adoption of the ordinance, City Council, City of Gilroy approving zone change application Z1805, a PUD zoning amendment to approve the planned unit development project for construction of the First Street and Kelton Drive commercial project filed by Don Votney Land Company, Z1805, introduced 12/3/18 with a 6-0-1 vote. Councilmember Harney abstaining. Sue? Sue? Is there, do you have anything you want to say or add, or?
No, this is second reading for adoption, so there's no additional presentation.
Good enough. Anybody from the public want to speak on this item? Shauna?
No card, sir.
Okay. Possible action. This is a roll call vote. Council, I need a motion to adopt an ordinance, City Council, City of Gilroy, approving zone change application C1805, a PUD zoning amendment to approve the planned unit development permit for construction of the First Street and Kelton Drive commercial project filed by Votney Land Company.
So move.
We have Councilmember LaRomagnos.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was to make the motion. I can never